the Chronicles podcast. Yeah.
Hi friends! Welcome back to the podcast. What do you think of the new intro? That is the first time I have ever made something in GarageBand. I know my little ums and ahs are a little bit weird, right? But I'm just getting back into the fact that I do actually enjoy singing. That intro and the outro, because I've done one for that as well, will probably change at some point, but let me know what you think. Right now, that's what we've got, because that's what I was capable of making, so I hope you like it. Getting into today's episode of the Cripple Chronicles, I am going to be doing the next part of the little representation series, where today we are looking at more visible disabilities. I want to give a bit of a disclaimer that throughout these episodes on representation, that there is probably going to be discussion of things that are triggering in a medical capacity. When it comes to less visible disabilities, there is a lot of stuff around mental health and different forms of abuse. When it comes to YouTube, I need to think about how to get around censoring and things like that, where still being able to be open about things that people struggle with. And this is something that I have put a lot of thought into, doing the visible representation. It is things that I've seen that since becoming somebody who it is very apparent that I'm disabled, with the frame and then getting my leg amputated in my wheelchair and not having a prosthetic. When I go out and about, people can tell because I need to use mobility aids and things like that. So it's some things that I've found that I thought were pretty good for representation, and I know when it comes to looking at visible and invisible disabilities that there is a whole range. Disability is a spectrum. I'm not going to be able to cover absolutely everything, but I do want this series to be something that I can come back to. So if there's things that I don't cover, things that you think are important and interesting, drop me a comment, leave me an email, send me a message on social media, whatever. But now that I've kind of done that little bit, spoke about my doing my GarageBand stuff, and yeah, I'm moving about the recording a wee bit on this because I feel like the level was a wee bit too loud, so I apologise if the speaking there was a wee bit too loud, but I think I've maybe fixed it now. It all kind of looks a bit better, but I'm going to get up my notes and let's see what I have actually got for talking about today. So I wanted to start this episode with a little poem that I had saved a while ago on Instagram. It is by somebody called Danielle Kopke, and their Instagram handle is unapologetically.human. Throughout these episodes, I am going to have things from different creators, whether that's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, podcast clips, things off of television. This is for commentary purposes. This is for me to give my own view on things that I think, and anything that I bring up, I do try to kind of verbally say who it is. And on the YouTube video, I will also have all of the credits and things like that, where you can go follow or watch the full content of these things, because I don't want to step on anybody's toes. These are just things that I found that I think are very important to talk about. I found this little post, or I saw it. It was a good couple of weeks ago. It really spoke to me, and I have another one of her poems that I'm going to close the podcast out with that also really spoke to me. I'm going to get into reading this. When you suffer from a trauma that your same age peers haven't faced, there's an inescapable feeling of I don't belong anywhere anymore. I can't relate to people anymore. I can't relate to the mundane struggles of everyday life. I can't relate to existing with ease or thinking about joy and fun and future adventure. I can't relate because I'm living in survival mode, just trying to figure out how to make it through a single day, through a single hour. I can't relate because you're building building and expanding and planning your future, and I'm stuck here in this moment just trying to exist in my body, just trying to will myself to take the next step, to breathe, the next breath, to crawl my way through the next day. And so you isolate and you decide that your pain makes you different or broken or damaged or shameful. And so you decide that these broken, damaged pieces make you incapable or unworthy of connection. And I need you to know that this is a lie. This is a story that your mind tells you to protect yourself, and understandably so, from potential rejection and invalidation and re-traumatisation and pain. And just because it makes sense in context, it doesn't mean it's true. Just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's helpful. It's an old story you learned, not one you were born into this world with. You're allowed to put it down. You're allowed to tell yourself a new story based on what you value today. You have the ability to move towards what's important to you, even when that old story gets unbearably loud. I affirm I am not damaged or broken. I'm human. I'm wounded. My pain makes sense when considered in context, and my pain isn't all of who I am. It's just one part. It's not the part that matters the most. I have the capacity to experience connection and belonging even in my pain, because I am a person, because my trauma doesn't erase my strengths and abilities and dreams and values, because these things are who I actually am, not my pain, because these things matter infinitely more. I affirm I refuse to choose to shame myself for something that I did not choose, that I cannot control or will away, that happened to me not because of me. I refuse to continue to hold on to other people's discomfort and judgment as my truth, because shame doesn't serve me. It only ever makes my life and my world painfully small. So I'm putting it down. I'm putting it down and giving it back. I'm putting it down and coming back to what's important to me now, today. And what's important to me is connection. What's important to me is compassion and authenticity and honesty and normalising being a messy, imperfect human. I affirm I'm putting my heart and energy into what I can control instead of what I can't, into the person I can be now, today, based on my values, rather than the person I used to be, who I no longer have access to following this trauma and this pain. I can grieve the person I used to be and the life I used to have, and honour the new person I am today, because even in this new life, there is room for wonder and joy and meaning and purpose, because even as this new person, there is room for strength and connection and growth. I affirm I am not broken or damaged or ruined. I am in transition. I'm learning, I'm adapting and reshaping, I'm rising, I'm becoming, I'm forever becoming. And that is a heartbreaking and painfully hard, but also beautiful and empowering thing, to accept that change is unavoidable, to honour all the changing versions of myself, and to trust that they all have meaning and purpose and value. I affirm I'm worthy of connection and belonging even in my pain. I'm worthy of being seen and known even in all my messy human complexity. I'm worthy of people who can hold space for the parts of me. I'm worthy of connection and belonging because I'm a person, because I'm a living, breathing thing, because we aren't meant to do this alone and have existed in community since the beginning of time, because healing doesn't happen in isolation, it happens in safe relationships, and I cannot collect evidence of new safety if I continue to isolate and shrink and avoid. I affirm, and if other people are uncomfortable with my honesty about my trauma and pain, then let them be uncomfortable. And if they're frustrated by my vulnerability, then let them be frustrated. It is not my job to temper my lived experiences to make people feel at ease. It is not my job to share my pain in a way that makes it more agreeable and palatable. Not everyone will have the capacity or desire to hold space for my pain and the fullness of who I am. And that is okay. That is normal and human. I don't need or want to be for everyone. I need to want and to be true for myself. I affirm where I am today will not be where I am on all days. In this moment, where I expand and who I grow into is impossible to predict. I don't have to be optimistic or hopeful, just open to the unpredictability of the future, just curious about how things could or might shift, just willing to be patient with and honour all versions of myself, because they all have value, because the best I can do and give each day means something, because the version of who I am today, even in all of my struggle, is worthy of feeling proud of, because they've brought me to this moment, because they've carried me on the days that I never thought I would make it. And that is something that I find very powerful. I started doing affirmations about a year and a half ago, and yeah, it felt bloody stupid when I started it, to be honest. Like, me and Ellen are sitting listening to Snoop Dogg raps of it doing affirmations, so it made it easier to do it. But it's something that I now do every day, and it comes with ease, because I believe that I'm worthy. I believe that I'm deserving of love. And there was a long time in my life where I didn't think about that, and I never thought that being disabled would be the thing that made me realise all of the things that I really have in my life. I think that was just something that I found really important to start the episode with. I think it's very powerful. This is a bit of a long introduction today, and to be honest, these couple of episodes are going to be pretty lengthy, to be honest. There's a lot of things to cover, and even in all of the time that I'll record and the things that I find and the things that I share with you, it'll never be covering all of it, and I am aware of that. I don't think that what I'm sharing is the only things that need to be represented. But last episode, I shared a video of me looking for research and how difficult that was. And to be honest, that was meant to be part of this episode. I didn't think that it would be 40 minutes of me talking through how difficult it was to find things, but there was also very important things that I covered from the traitors and their representation and research that I found about that, as well as a poem that I had found on Instagram. Danielle writes a lot of things that I resonate with, and there is also somebody else on Instagram who I resonate a lot with, and their at is Anna's a Roll, and I think she's on TikTok as well. And I found one of her videos that I really loved, and initially when I was recording this episode, like, I've already recorded stuff from this, but it didn't fit right, and I couldn't find this video, and I think I must have spent about 10 minutes looking for it because I hadn't put it on my laptop and it was on my drive and I couldn't have it plugged in when I had my microphone plugged in. So anyway, this is a really rambly long intro today, but like I said, these episodes are going to be lengthy. Listen to it on 1.5, 2 times speed. And yeah, if there are things that I start to talk about that are too difficult for you, then it is totally okay to switch off and come back for another episode, because I do realise that things that I'm going to cover could be quite hard hitting, but it's things that I feel like they need to be said. For those listening along, this video that I'm going to play is of Anna's a Roll. Anna getting into her car with her child and using her wheelchair and then assembling her wheelchair into the car. And I'm just explaining what's happening in the video because the main important part of it is what she says in the video, which I'm going to play for you now.
I heard this quote a couple of years ago that sums up the essence and why I show up not only in the online world, but the physical one. The quote goes like this: "If you don't see us, you won't think of us." It was written by disability activist Laura Hershey, and it serves as a reminder of just how crucial representation is today and every day.
And I just thought that was a really good video to start this episode off with. If you don't see us, you don't think of us. That's why I post content without my leg, with my leg in my wheelchair, doing things. What is the accessibility like in places? Just being myself and not isolating myself, because representation is needed, and there has been an improvement in media, I would say, for representation. But like I said in my last episode, it is hard with online and algorithms, and is this content just being pushed out to people who struggle with this, and people who don't struggle aren't being shown it. But I don't know, it's like the same as having a podcast about disability called the Chronicles. I don't know how many able-bodied people listen to this podcast, but I still feel like it's good to put it out there. Like, I've been doing a lot of clips on TikTok and it being like people saying, oh, this is out of context, like blah blah blah. Like, go watch the full episode on YouTube then, like, and if you don't want to, just move on. I mean, if you want to leave a comment saying this doesn't make sense, like I'm confused, then cool, that boosts up my engagement, it boosts up my views, it's more people that's seeing it, even if they don't understand what's happening, because in that there was maybe 2,000 views on TikTok and 10 views on YouTube, but that's still 10 people that might not have seen my video without those comments. So it's a thing where it kind of back and forth, I guess, but that actually wasn't what I was going to say. I've got a bit distracted. I was actually just meant to finish the introduction after that video and say, like, that's the representation that's oh my god, brains a mash. That's the video that I wanted to finish the introduction on and get into some information that I have found about more visible disabilities. I've also kind of included deaf, hard of hearing and visual impairments just for the fact of using aids that show that these people are disabled. I understand that there is a lot of hard of hearing, deaf, blind community who you wouldn't be able to tell from looking at them. However, it was something that I had thought about before and I'd actually missed it out, and it fits into the things that I'm talking about today. So I'm going to wrap up this introduction and get into this week's episode of the podcast. As usual, if you're listening on Spotify, give it a like, turn on your notifications, any other audio platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, give it a subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, tell me your opinions. If you've got anything that you would like me to talk about, any stories, anything that you would like to be shared on the podcast, either with your name or with anonymously, then with anonymously, yep, good word, and Becca. Anyway, you can email me at cripplecchroniclespod@gmail.com, and yeah, let's get into this week's episode. So I wanted to kind of do these episodes on representation because I do feel like I've got a bit of a look at both sides of the coin with my leg. With not having a prosthetic at the moment, I need to use my crutches, my wheelchair. However, in my life, I'm hoping there will be a point where I'm able to wear my leg and potentially walk short distances where I don't need to use any mobility aids, and if I have trousers on and padding on my leg and I'm not limping to anybody, it'll look like I'm not disabled. And that is something that there is such a massive population of people who have invisible disabilities, and I feel in my last episode I had said kind of hidden disabilities, but in doing research for it I'm realising that hidden's not the right terminology, because it's like if I went out with trousers on and my prosthetic and things like that, hiding it on purpose. I'm not hiding it on purpose. I'm just wearing things that make me comfortable. I feel it from that side of my disability being fluid, in a way of some days I'll look disabled, some days I won't look disabled, but in my brain I also have problems. Well, that's one way to put it. I've got anxiety, depression, complex PTSD, potentially autism, ADHD, all of the other things that go along with that. I have chronic pain, I have hypermobility, things that people can't see. People can't see my pain receptors, they can't see in my brain when it's taken me 2 hours to process something, or they tell a joke and I laugh an hour later because it's finally just clicked in my brain what they meant. But that's something that is hard to portray, I think. There's a lot of things that portray more invisible disabilities, but I am going to get on to talking about that in the next episode, because this episode is about more visible things. And I understand that visible disabilities actually make up a smaller population on the range of disabilities. However, this is some things that I have found in day-to-day life, on social media, on the TV, maybe things about movies that I have seen where representation is shown. Like, I feel I feel like I'm just mumbling up all my words today, but again, that was the same as last week's episode, so maybe that's just where we're at right now. This episode is kind of split into things I've seen, things I've liked, and then also maybe looking at where visible disabilities aren't represented correctly, thinking about people portraying characters who aren't actually disabled. Again, just like the disclaimer that I gave in the introduction, all of the things that I say in this episode and the following episodes, these are just my take on it, being someone who lives with both visible and invisible disabilities. I am always open to conversations and happy if people disagree with my views, and I'm happy to learn as long as it's done in a respectful way. If people are going to be mean and things like that, I'm not really open to having the discussions, but I'm always happy to talk to people who maybe I have a view and they have a view that is opposite. I'm happy to chat about those things, but not if it's in a disrespectful manner, because it takes a lot to speak about these things. And the videos that I find and people talking about disabilities and things like that, it's a lot to be able to advocate for yourself and your disability, because when you're advocating for yourself, you're advocating for other people who can't speak up. And living as a disabled person and the challenges that comes with it can be exhausting, so just be nice. Anyway, I'm going to get on to speaking about deaf, hard of hearing, visual impairments. At the start of COVID, I actually tried to start learning sign language, because at this time I thought I would be still going back to nursing, and I thought, well, there is going to be people who come into my care who might be non-verbal, who might be hard of hearing, who might be deaf, and I don't know sign language apart from the alphabet. So I started doing a few lessons. I think I maybe did 5 lessons. I taught myself to say, hello, my name is Becca, I am from Scotland and I am a nurse, because I thought that would be very helpful, but I didn't think about things like, how can I help you? Is there anything that I can do? Writing things down, maybe people aren't the best at writing, so that's why sign language is important. The thing that I'm thinking of when I start talking about sign language, and I feel like it should be something that is taught in schools. I mean, I got taught German for 6 years and I don't remember any of it, and I've never been to Germany. I just think that maybe it would be better to teach people something like sign language, because I feel like I'm more likely to come across somebody in day-to-day life who I need to speak to using sign language instead of somebody that I need to speak to German. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that is just kind of my thinking in it. I'm going to get on to talking about a lot of representation on soaps on UK television, because that's a bit of a guilty pleasure, but not really a guilty pleasure. Coronation Street is actually one of the ones where I've started watching it a few years ago. I started watching it when they had the storyline with Nina, who was the goth, and her boyfriend, and he ended up dying, and this story was based on what had happened to Sophie Lancaster, who this story was adapted from. STV worked along with the family and things like that so that they portrayed it in the right way, and I really enjoyed watching that. And then it just became something where it's part of my routine now, where I'll watch it on catch up. I don't watch it when it's on the TV, because I'm not good with time to remember when it's on. The reason I'm bringing that up is because there is quite a lot of representation there for hard of hearing and deaf, as there was a few episodes maybe about a year or so ago, and actually in quite a bit of the episodes there is a wee boy who was born deaf, and they were talking about him getting an implant put in, and there was this kind of discussion around, why are you wanting your child not to be disabled? Why are you wanting them to get an implant and be quote unquote normal, whatever that is, but you're also excluding them from the hard of hearing in the deaf community if you're not teaching them sign language as well as having the implant. And they did a few episodes where there was quite a few bits of it that were done in sign language, and I think there was maybe some backlash from it. I meant to investigate this so people can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was a bit of backlash on the fact that they hadn't subtitled when they were doing sign language, but I feel like that kind of represents what it's like for deaf people when subtitles aren't put on things. And I just thought that was a very good way to show it. I'm not sure if that was ITV's idea of doing it. However, when I started doing this podcast, it is very important for me that I don't just use the auto captions on YouTube. I have found something where it takes less time for me to do the captions, but for the first 20 episodes, I would sit for days transcribing my own voice because YouTube captioning is good, but it's not reliable, and I'm making a podcast about disability, and if I don't have captions, then I'm cutting off a population of disabled people who can still interact with my videos even if they can't hear my voice. And I just think that's something that's not really thought about a lot. And on my analytics, like initially before it had kind of said that more of my captions were the auto-generated ones, and I got a bit of a feeling of like, why am I wasting my time doing this? But it's not a waste of time, because even like my gran listens to my podcast episodes, and I got so confused initially because she would be like, I've read your episodes, and I'm like, what are you on about? But she has a video on in the background and she reads the transcript because that's how it goes in, and there's parts where she'll stop and she'll listen to it and she'll read it again. And even if it's just for the ease of my gran watching my podcast, I will continue to do that because it just makes it more accessible for people, and I think that's something that's important. I have some stats. 1 in 5 adults in the UK are deaf, have hearing loss or tinnitus. 12 million adults in the UK are deaf, have hearing loss or tinnitus. That is roughly 10.1 people, 10.1 people, 10.1 million people in England, 1 million people in Scotland, and 610,000 people in Wales, and 320,000 people in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland. In the UK, more than 40% of over 50s have hearing loss, and over the age of 70, that rises to a massive 70%. This is on the national website for deaf and hearing loss. Disabling hearing loss refers to hearing loss which is greater than 35 decibels in your better hearing ear. Nearly 80% of disabling hearing loss live in low and middle income countries, which is very important. It's very interesting. And the prevalence of hearing loss increases with age. Among those older than 60 years of age, over 25% are affected by disabling hearing loss. So there's a distinction between what is hearing loss and what is disabling hearing loss. So I think these figures are off of different websites. The first statistic with over 40% of over 50s have hearing loss rising to 70%. That is on rnid.org, and this is just talking about the UK. However, the disabling hearing loss is from the World Health Organisation, and that is for a worldwide view. So over 60s, 25% of people have hearing loss, which is to a disabling impact in their life. So I then also have statistics where I wanted to look at visual impairments. So there are over 2 million people in the UK who are living with sight loss. These people meet the international definition of visual impairment and include everyone whose vision is worse than 6/2 Snellian, which is halfway down the optician's letter chart that they have when you go in to do your eye test. This is also the amount of vision loss it requires people to surrender their driving licence in the UK. There may be a range of reasons of why people don't have vision corrected if possible, such as additional needs like dementia. There is things like getting laser eye surgery, but it's pretty expensive, and I think in kind of statistics, I know people who have had laser eye surgery that's lasted longer, but I think it's roughly like 10-15 years before you need to get it done again. Out of that, 2 million people living in the UK with sight loss, 340,000 of them are registered blind or partially sighted. And I tried to kind of look more into the guidelines of using the optician's chart of like how far down it would be when these things are kind of registered as being sight loss, like visual impairment, being registered blind. However, I get very confused when I was trying to look at the stuff because it was a lot of numbers and charts and none of it really made sense to my brain, and I really wanted to be able to explain it, but I can't. I wanted to add hard of hearing and vision problems into this episode, like I said, because people use supports like canes, glasses, guide dogs, cochlear implants, or just normal kind of hearing aids. But I know nowadays there's hearing aids that are like so small that you can hardly see them, but this is the reason why I've kind of included visual impairments and hard of hearing population in the episode of visual, because I understand that it's not visual all the time, but I still wanted to give it a bit of recognition. So I wanted to go on to talk about some representation, which has been important for me since becoming disabled, well, more accepting disability, because yes, I struggled a lot with mental health, but I would never have classed it as being disabled, even though there was points where I literally couldn't leave the house or do things because of my mental health, which means it's disabling. But it's been a process to accept that about myself, and I think it would have been a lot harder if I didn't have the accident and my visual disability and using a wheelchair and having to really lean into the fact that I'm disabled and I'm going to be disabled for the rest of my life, whether I have a prosthetic and I can wear it without using any aids. It's still going to cause me pain. It's still going to mean that I need to use my wheelchair around the house so I can go out and do those things. I just think, yeah, it's been a process to kind of accept it, but these are the things that have been important for me in accepting my disability through representation. My disabled Barbies, they are actually over on my desk. I should have had them up with me, but these were made for me by 2 of my friends who just bought them without even knowing that each other had, so they then redesigned them without giving each other their ideas, and they have a like glam outside Becca and a nighttime Becca. I'm going to put some videos of me with them in the video episode like portion on YouTube, but that was really important to me because I got so excited when I saw that. I got so excited when I saw the Barbies that had prosthetics, and to be honest, I wasn't really much of a Barbie kid. Like, I was more Polly Pockets. I like chewing on the shoes and things like that. Goes for sensory and autism and things, just liking that feeling. I know a lot of kids chew things, like that's not my one defining factor of why I think I'm autistic, but I'm going to get into more on that in the next episode, down to diagnosis and things like that. But back to my disabled Barbies, back to this point, they were so important. It felt so good to me to see that representation, and I got so excited being a 23-24-year-old, and I just think of the excitement that children seeing that representation. I also went to Build-A-Bear, and I was so excited when I saw that they did little crutches for the bears, and then I almost died when I saw the wheelchair and I got it. So I've literally got the wheelchair in well, it sits in my wardrobe, but Simba likes to go in my wardrobe and he keeps knocking it out and knocking my two rabbits that chill in the wheelchair out of it, so that gives you an idea of Simba's ableist attitudes, even though his mother's in a wheelchair. But yeah, that was something, just like seeing these things where it makes it feel more normalised, and that's a really lovely feeling. And I found a video as I was researching for this and looking for disabled Barbies, because I wanted to see the joy on like children's faces. However, at the time when I was looking at this, Down syndrome Barbies had just came out, and I found this video on TikTok from Grace understroke Strobo, and she's talking about the new Down syndrome Barbie, and it just makes me smile every time I watch it, because like I'm an empathetic person, and I genuinely feel like I can feel the joy, and that's just, it makes me happy. So yeah, let's see this video.
She has Down syndrome like me. She's so beautiful.
She's so beautiful, and so are you, Grace. Like, it makes me so happy to watch it. Like, after I found it, I actually sent it into a group chat, my pals, and I was like, oh my god, watch this. Like, I love it so much. It makes me so happy. And I then found another video, which, typical of shops, not thinking about accessibility, but there's wheelchair Barbies on the top shelf, out of reach. Typical. And the sound in the background is "How I Love Being a Woman." I don't know if that's a copyrighted sound, so it's probably going to be silenced whilst I talk over it. However, there is another content creator who I really, really love, like, so much, and her name is Samantha. She goes by a disabled icon, who I mostly see content on Instagram. I know she's on Threads. I think she's on X, TikTok. And I'm not sure if she's got a YouTube channel. I think she might have. And she started making some adaptive clothing after she had a surgery on her shoulder. And I loved seeing just the creativity of people to make things that suit them for their disability. And one of the reasons I followed Samantha in the first place was because of her style. I love the outfits that she wears, how her mobility aids match her aesthetic, which was one of the reasons why I got my orange crutches, why I've got my spoke covers on my wheels, so that even though my wheelchair doesn't feel like it totally suits me, it still feels like it matches my personality, because my mobility aids are part of me, and they don't need to be boring. They can be as fabulous as I am. And seeing the representation, the content that Samantha, a disabled icon, puts out on social media is one of the reasons why I became so comfortable in that, and that is so important. And I didn't even know that when I followed her initially, that Samantha also had a Lazaroff frames on her legs because of Maffucci syndrome, which is to do with tumours growing on your bones. And she's done a lot of content about people saying that she's not really disabled because she walks with a cane and uses a wheelchair and things like this. And just the comments that you see on social media that you must be faking it if you can walk a few metres, and that's just not the reality. Well, I found a video that Samantha had done talking about Maffucci syndrome and things like that, and I'm going to play it for you just so you can see a little bit of her personality, hear what her journey's been like in a little sense of it.
Growing up, I was convinced I was unlovable. As a Gen Z millennial cusp, my tacky Y2K style matched the self-hatred. But my journey to maximalism was far from ordinary, as I faced medical odds that made me an actual statistical anomaly. I was born with Maffucci syndrome, an extremely rare bone disease, and had excruciating bone and vein tumors all over my body. A series of invasive surgeries starting at the age of 6 made me predominantly a wheelchair user, homebound, and homeschooled. Naturally, this meant that I was bullied a lot, and I think eventually the ableism got to me because I refused to wear anything that showed off my legs. But amidst the pain and challenges, there was a pivotal moment that changed everything. When I was 12, I realized that if anyone wants to judge me because of my disabilities, they don't actually love me and they don't deserve to be in my life. I found strength in wearing colorful outfits to elevate my mood and combat stereotypes. Accessorizing with funky berets and unique purses transformed my style into a work of art, much like my perfectly imperfect body. Through color coordination, I celebrated my vibrant self. By wearing heels, I found my princess-like confidence that allows me to express my style fearlessly. And if I'm gonna get stares anyway for being a wheelchair user, I might as well give them something iconic to look at by decorating my wheelchair. Let my maximalism story remind us all that fashion is a powerful form of art, a way to embrace our uniqueness and reclaim autonomy. Be inspired and let yourself express yourself boldly with maximalism, just like me.
I love it so much, like, that I'm going to get stares if I'm in a wheelchair anyway, so why not give them something to look at? That is exactly how I felt when I first put my spokes on my chair, and I literally went out yesterday and I was in a shop and 2 people had said, oh my god, I love them, they're so colourful, and then the guy behind the counter was asking me about them, and he'd said, oh, my wife's actually in a wheelchair and she uses it quite a lot, so I'm just thinking of something that I can do that makes it more hers without me being out and about. If I isolate myself, there's people out there that don't get that, and I just think that, like, I owe it to myself to live my life however I want to live it, and that shows other people that they can do it too. I feel like Samantha's content is very accepting of disability and mobility aids, and I think she talks a lot on issues that disabled people face in a respectful but also take no shit manner way, which I absolutely fucking love. Also, there's one of her videos that I watched which was about chronic pain and not being able to see somebody's pain receptors, and when she's taking photos or doing videos, that the way she moves is to take pain, like to take weight off of where she's in pain. But when I was scrolling through all the videos, like, I couldn't find it. I feel like I must have went back years, which is how I'd found the first video that I've just played there. But I went back to before I was even following her, and I was like, where is this video gone? So I don't know where I saw it. It was maybe on TikTok, but I'm not sure. So I then also found another video from Samantha, which I will play on the screen. However, I'm going to read what it says because it's just words on the screen, and then I'm going to read the caption. So it says, I will never stop being the representation that I needed growing up being disabled. You're disabled, you can't take up space. Quote. Disabled people deserve to take up space. Representation is important. It helps dispel harmful stereotypes and misconceptions. Disabled people deserve to exist without fear of discrimination. I will never stop being the representation that I needed growing up disabled. And then the caption is, representation is the key to breaking down that harmful stereotypes and ableism that infiltrate every part of our lives from work to school. Lack of representation lets these biases thrive unchallenged, leading to discrimination and exclusion. Growing up without seeing disabled role models in the media or my community, I learned to view my disability negatively. It felt like a barrier to success, happiness, and even basic needs, a lie that took root without positive examples to counter it. Ableism in the workplace and education systems blocks opportunities and undervalues the contributions of disabled individuals. By amplifying diverse voices, we challenge these misconceptions, showcasing the multifaceted lives of disabled people beyond their disabilities. Embracing representation transforms societal views on disability, celebrating our strength and resilience instead of focusing on the deficits. It gives young disabled people role models, helping them to see their potential and dream big without internalising ableism. As a role model I needed but never had, I'm here to change the narrative for future generations, ensuring a world that recognises and values everybody's unique contributions. I just felt like that was definitely on point with what I was wanting to do with this little series of looking at representation and speaking up about things. I'm actually going to take a wee sidetrack just from finishing reading that caption. I saw a video last night. Marky is one of my favourite kind of like YouTubers, does commentary, and he was doing commentary about a girl on TikTok who, not sure if it's like a character, but there was a video where she was in her car and she was literally saying like, I don't even want to go to the mall because there's all these groups of intellectually disabled people and my life's already bad enough, I don't want to see that misery. And I'm like, that's fucking vile. Those people deserve to live their lives. Even if you are playing a character for rage bait, it's vile. Why are you more important? I don't know, like, if you can't go to a mall without feeling guilty because you need to see disabled people, then you have some work that you need to do for yourself on why you have those views, because wow. But anyway, back to the actual episode that we're talking about today. Some other representation that I've seen on social media recently. Chris MD released a video. He does quite a lot of football content, and to be honest, I'm not a big football girly. I don't really care about football. The most exciting thing for me when it comes to a game of football is when it's a big game and it needs to go to extra time and nobody scores and then it goes to penalties, because it's like, ooh, a little bit of excitement. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is he released a video with Thomas Atkinson, who is a goalkeeper from Carlisle, and he is an amputee. And I've seen quite a few videos of amputee football hopping about with their crutches. Like, it looks absolutely savage at times, but most of the content I've seen is people with one leg. However, this goalkeeper has one arm, and although I am really not interested in football content, like, it was really interesting to watch like the first 5 or 6 minutes of it to see like how fucking good he actually was at it. Like, I was like, you're getting up there, like, you are good at that shit.
It's amputee football, Nations League. What are the requirements? You play 7 sides, and so 7 field players have to be lower limb amputees. Have I got that right?
Yeah, bang on. So all the outfielders use crutches to move around on the pitch, and as goalkeepers like myself, I like arm deficiency, so different disabilities or amputations can require to different roles. So
you're a one-arm goalkeeper.
Yeah.
You've only got one leg as well.
Yeah, I know. So I'm like one of the like acceptance of the categories in regards to like I'm not only like English double amputee.
I think amputee football is something that I would actually like to see what it's like in person, but I don't think I would like to join in with it. My ex was actually quite into power chair football, and I'd been to a few games, and I did find it really interesting how it works, how they've adapted normal football rules for playing football in wheelchairs, and the different kind of rules that go into it to make sure that everybody kind of gets an equal chance on the pitch in games. And it was interesting, but it was really confusing for me, because like a lot of the times there was like 2 games going on at once and there was like no commentary. I think I maybe watched one stream where there was commentary and I could actually follow it, but without the commentary, with everything kind of going on. And as well, I am very sensitive to noise and the squeaking of the power chairs when like turning and things like that. It was a lot for me. Like, anytime those chairs squeaked, it literally felt like I was being stabbed. But I still wanted to go and kind of support my ex and things like that, because it was something that he was really passionate about. And I think kind of seeing that and going to different things and meeting different people for sporting and disabilities and things like that, it was really interesting to see it. I remember going to an awards night. I was nearly tearing up at one of the schools that had won for like sport and excellence in school, and videos of all of the teachers like running about, pushing wheelchairs and things like that, getting kids involved. I think that's what kids need, and there's such a stigma, I think, around special schools, like schools for children who have additional needs. I think there's a lot of stigma around it, and it makes me really sad, to be honest, because would you not rather that your child went somewhere where they were accepted in their disability and did things where they felt like they were involved, instead of being put into the public school system where they just feel isolated? And I don't know, like, it just... Anyway, that again was a bit of a sidetrack. I've clearly got a lot of things that I want to say today, and definitely so, because I've still got like another 3 or 4 points to go through. These episodes are going to be lengthy. I'm not sure how long this episode is going to be after I cut it down, but with the information that I've still got to go through, it's going to be lengthy. Listen to it in 1.5, 2 times speed, like whatever works for you, or just click off and come back when I've got another episode that's 40 minutes long. But yeah, another creator that I wanted to have a wee spotlight on is Ruben Roldak _YPK, and I think the YPK is for parkour, but he is an amputee who does parkour, and I find it so fucking cool. Like, anytime his videos pop up in my feed, I am actually just like, I could do that. Like, my knee is gubbed. Since having my leg amputated, I went from having like a 30% knee bend to 75%. Like, if I really wanted to do it, I could do parkour like that. And that is, I just wanted to mention that because that is the reason why I think representation is so important. It's why I'm doing these episodes, because seeing that pop up on my feed makes me feel like I can do that. Seeing clips of people literally doing indoor rock climbing in their wheelchair, I was like, well, rock climbing's on my list to do with my prosthetic, but I didn't realise I could do it with my wheelchair. Fuck yeah, I'm doing that. Like, seeing things and realising, wow, yeah, I can actually do that. And I just think that's so important. One of the last highlights of social media representation that has been important for me and my disability is the biggest one of all, to be honest. I'm actually having to take my earphone out. I usually listen to music when I'm recording, but that's really hurting my ear today. But yeah, so the last person I want to give a little spotlight on representation is Aaron Wheels. The first content I was sent by him was from Jonathan, and I had the caption saying, "I've not told Eleanor I've sent you this, she might fucking kill me, but check how fucking cool this is." And I was like, jaw dropped wide open, like going down a massive ramp, landing a flip. Yeah, I want to do that. Like, wheelchair motocross, yeah, sign me the fuck up. And I fell into a loop of watching loads of these videos and loads of different people's videos, and then finding out that they actually maybe want to make wheelchair motocross a part of Paralympic sports. So I was like, fuck yeah, if they make it part of Paralympics, I'm going for gold, baby. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I end up in a wheelchair, I'm already fucking there. Like, bring it on. And that is, to me, why representation is so fucking important. Like, I have swore so many times in this, and I said about censoring, so I am probably going to have to bleep myself, but it is so important to me, seeing those things, seeing videos of people doing such cool stuff and being like, yeah, I can do that. Like, right now, the wheelchair I've got, it's 16 kilograms, it squeaks and creaks whenever I move. It wouldn't handle going to the skate park. Like, I actually think sometimes when I'm going down curbs, like, one more bump and the chair's just going to fall out of it, and I'm just going to be sitting on the ground with my wheels over me or something like that. So I'm not confident enough to do it at the moment, and I really wish I was. But when I get my new wheelchair, I will definitely be hitting fucking outdoor skate parks, doing all the tricks. Like, I can't wait. I'm so excited. And it is from seeing those videos, from seeing that representation, and going back to the first video that I played in the introduction. If you don't see us, you don't think of us. And even as being somebody who is disabled, and all of the goals that I have in my life, without seeing things, sometimes I don't think about it. Sometimes I don't consider it. And that's why it's important. Like, I feel like I've said that's why representation is important so many times in this episode. I've actually realised that when I was making my little garage band tune the other day, I should have made a little jingle for a new section on the podcast, which is the Disability Spotlight. A little bit of singing there, that was absolutely horrible. Do you know what? I'm going to try and do it again, and I'm actually going to have a little sip of water, and I'm not going to cut this bit out because why cut it out when the episode's already over an hour long and it's just me getting into being a bit bloody manic, isn't it? So today we have the Disability Spotlight on Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS. What is it? EDS is a group of connective tissue disorders that impact skin, joint, blood vessels. Think hypermobility, skin that bruises easily, stretchy skin, a whole other range of symptoms. There are different types of Ehlers-Danlos, each with its own set of unique challenges. It is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Some types might focus more on joints, while some might more involve more serious complications. And I found a video from an account on TikTok called Global Healthy Living Foundation, and it is fronted by a guy named Joey, and I'm going to play through a couple of videos of his experience with EDS, and from the rest of his content he has also done content which has helped him with his EDS. And if you are somebody who has Ehlers-Danlos and feels like you could benefit from the things that Joy might have to say, then it was Global Healthy Living Foundation on TikTok. And yeah, let's see these videos.
Hi, my name's Joey. I'm 26 and I live with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and POTS, and I was diagnosed when I was 21. I've dealt with chronic debilitating pain for the past decade, and dislocations and fatigue and all the symptoms that come with living with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But through exercise and living a very active lifestyle, I've managed through trial and error to overcome a lot of the challenges that come with having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so I wanted to make a series that consists of all the different techniques and strategies that I've used to become more functional and more active and reduce my pain and fatigue and live, a healthy lifestyle despite having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
The next video I am going to play is part 1 of this series by Joey.
Hi, my name's Joey and this is part 1 of the EDS Basics series. In this video, I'll just be explaining some tips and strategies and general information about EDS. So first up, it's important to recognize that not everyone who has EDS dislocates joints or is hypermobile. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a spectrum and therefore everyone is affected differently. Speaking of the spectrum, number 2, most people with EDS are actually neurodivergent and a lot of us are autistic, so if you've ever felt like the odd one out, that might explain a lot of things. 3, not everyone with EDS has stretchy skin. Again, it's a spectrum. 4, wearing compression clothing provides a lot of proprioception, which helps your body understand where it is in space. I highly recommend it. 5, a lot of us have much more fibrous, brittle teeth, and our enamel can wear down much quicker, so you might be seeing the dentist a lot more. 6, if you also have POTS, which most of us do, you should be drinking a lot of water, especially with electrolytes, and potentially even be on a beta blocker. Follow along for more tips.
With this video, it is obviously on the screen, it literally says speak to your health professional, because talk of beta blockers, being put on medication and things. However, the journey to getting a diagnosis can be quite a ride for EDS. It involves genetic testing, working closely with healthcare professionals, and many people go through a bit of a journey before landing on the right diagnosis. As Joey said, a lot of people with EDS are also autistic, and there is a lot of misdiagnosis with autism, which I am going to get into in the next episode. However, this is about EDS, so managing EDS can be like juggling a few things: physical therapy, pain management, and adjusting your lifestyle. Like Joey had said in those videos, finding ways where he can work where it doesn't impact his life as much. And when I was listening to that video, I've listened to it a few times, but when he'd said about kind of compression clothing, it actually made me go, oh yeah, I actually feel better when I'm wearing tighter clothing sometimes, because it gives me an idea of perception, because like my depth perception is awful. In my car I've literally got a teddy to the side of me to like remind me of my spatial awareness. EDS can be a massive impact on daily life. Work can become challenging, relationships may need to be more understanding, and overall quality of life can be affected. It is like a balancing act with extra hurdles. And I found another creator who goes by @ShitTonySays on TikTok, and I am going to play her 3-minute video talking about her struggles with chronic illness such as vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
So today's video is not going to be funny. I have tried to type a post out on social media, and I didn't really want to because it was just upsetting to me. But today I want to talk about what it's like to live with a chronic illness that shortens your life. I have vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's a specific type of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. It is the most severe type. The median age of death when you have the vascular form of Ehlers-Danlos is age 48. A lot of people live beyond that, and they don't have complications until later in life. But I want to talk about what it's like when you constantly see people die prematurely. A couple of days ago, a 12-year-old boy in my support group died a day after being diagnosed with strep throat. If you don't understand about connective tissue disorders and what VEDS actually is, so the collagen that our body makes, a certain type of collagen, is defective. It's really weak. It's not strong. And in this type of EDS, it's our arteries. Those are important because when those fall apart, you bleed to death. It's our hollow organs. So it's going to be like my uterus, for example. Pregnancy is very dangerous in people with vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So when you have an infection, like strep throat, or any infection really, just a mundane, something I've been diagnosed myself, like I've had strep throat so many times. An everyday infection, when you have vascular Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, that infection can just weaken that tissue to the point that it falls apart, because the tissue is already weak genetically. And that little boy died at 12 just from, because his body couldn't handle an infection that we've all had. And I just want to talk about how hard it is when you are in that community and you see it every day.
That is part 1 of the video from Tony, and I think, to be honest, like, having one part of it is hard hitting enough. Like, it's very difficult when you live with something where you go to support groups and you see a child die with an illness that everybody else has had. And I feel there's a lot of things when it comes to grief, especially when you live with chronic illness, and you think, well, why not me? Why was it them? They had so much more of their life ahead of them, and how have I been to hospital and got through this and they don't get to live? And it can be so upsetting, so confusing, and I think empathy really is crucial. If you know someone dealing with EDS, arm yourself with information, connect with others who understand, and build a support system. Advocate for yourself in your healthcare journey if you are somebody with EDS, and remember that you're not alone. Since having my accident, I have been told that I am hypermobile, and there has been a period of questioning my symptoms, being undiagnosed, autistic, ADHD, having hypermobility, not knowing if that is down to the fact that when I had my accident, my knee and my leg was literally floating, but I do feel like my hips kind of click and clack, and like I had to get my hip put back into place when I was younger because of overcompensation when I had an accident before. However, like, I don't know if it would just be down to things from my accident, and most of the content that I have picked out for this episode and this section is things that I thought were educational or things that resonate towards me. And I'm going to finish off today's disability spotlight with something that's a bit more serious, I wanted to play this video that Eleanor actually found the other day when I was speaking to her, and it's about getting a spinal tap or lumbar puncture whilst having EDS. And I've spoke quite a lot on episodes previously round about the end of last year when I was going to Eleanor's a lot and having to give a lot of support, and it is kind of down to things because of this high neurological pressure, having to get fluid taken out of her back, which has now made her more disabled. She can't walk properly, she can't do things for any amount of time without having to lie down and being put on heavy duty meds. I think I just wanted to play this video because it isn't just a one-off kind of thing, and Eleanor had this scenario done and it actually caused more damage, left her feeling worse, and she has a huge amount of brain pressure fluid behind her eyes that opticians are worried about and neurology isn't doing anything about it, and it's just wild. So yeah, I'm going to play this video to end today's disability spotlight on EDS. If you are somebody who has EDS, then maybe be cautious when getting spinal taps.
Okay, yeah, PSA to everybody with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I would probably skip the spinal tap, the lumbar puncture, the lumbar tap. I really wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. Not only was the procedure itself terrifying, now I am in worse pain than I was before. So I had 3 thunderclap headaches last week. So I went to the ER yesterday, like after my 3rd one. And they did a CT scan to see if I had subarachnoid hemorrhaging, but it was normal, which can happen after 72 hours of the first thunderclap. Like if you don't get imaging, it might not show, you know? So they decided, they're like, well, we could do a spinal tap and that would tell us for sure. And in my brain thinking, well, I'm obviously going to do that, right? Because I think it's important to know if I'm bleeding on the brain, you know, right? Or if I have like a brain infection, like I feel like I should know that. So I was like, okay, let's do a spinal tap. So I get in the room, they come in the room, I sit on the side of the bed, and they have me lean over kind of a thing. You have to like arch your back out towards them, like your lower back, kind of like a cat. And, you know, first they like clean the area, and then they put the drape on there. And then they're feeling around, and then they start poking, and they have to like try to get into the spine. And they kept running into like spinous processes in my back and stuff. And it was terrifying. My chest started dripping in sweat. I got really faint, so I told them like halfway through, I was like, because they weren't like kidding me, I was like, I need a break, I'm really nauseous. So they gave me Zofran and let me kind of chill out for a second. But yeah, it wasn't really that painful. I mean, very weird. Didn't love it. Didn't love somebody in my spine. You know, not my favorite. Not super painful, but it was so scary. And now, since I've left the ER, I've been in a lot more pain. All last night I was rolling around in pain. I couldn't fall asleep. My head is killing me when I stand up. Like the longer I'm upright, the worse my headache starts to get. I have like this dragging pain in my spine. My ears feel like kind of muffled. Like it's almost like I feel like I'm like got like water like in my nose or something kind of feeling, you know. Yeah, I'm just in so much pain. Like it's painful. My lower back is hurting. Sorry, Tyler just texted me. I got distracted. So anyways, I wish I would have known to skip the spinal tap before I did it. I don't think it was a good idea. I really don't think that. I don't feel right. I don't feel right at all. Like this is not normal. I got so much pain meds last night. Like come on, there's no way I should be in this much pain. Keep taking sumatriptan and ibuprofen, but the only thing that really helps is just laying down. My head still even hurts right now. Like it's still painful, just not as bad as when it's standing. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. So skip the spinal tap. I'd say if you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Let me know what questions you have. I love you all. Hi. I just wanted to add this when I'm standing. Like I feel like a dragging sensation like inside my skull here, putting pressure on my eyeballs. A lot of pressure. Not sure if I got imaging or anything. It'd be normal. I'm sure everything looks normal, but I don't feel normal. Oh, my ears just popped. Couldn't help. Now I'm in more pain. Yeah, lay down again. Okay, yeah.
This video was very, I think, hard-hitting for me and also for Eleanor, kind of in a sense of this shouldn't have been done, especially as many times as it was done to her. And literally the first comment on this post is, sorry to jump right into advice, but get to the emergency room or call your neurologist and get a blood patch ASAP. This sounds so much like a CSF leak. I have had one for 12 years. That is what they think that Eleanor has. They told her that there was nothing wrong with her back, sent her home when I was there, it was recorded, and then they took her back in and told her, yeah, there is a hole and you might need a a blood patch. The next part of this is the chance of self-healing for an EDSer from a puncture is much lower than it is for general population, and many doctors are unaware of this. Not to frighten this, but this can become a chronic condition if it's not properly treated. The symptoms tend to change when it's chronic, but it's still very brutal. After you get a blood patch, avoid bending, lifting anything over £10 or twisting for 6 weeks. These precautions are per CSF leak guidelines with specialists who treat people with EDS. General population doesn't have to worry about them, so doctors are generally unaware of these guidelines. For more information, you can go to csfleaks.org, comment on here or DM me. So if there is any of you who have EDS, who have had a spinal tap and who have feelings like Micro Cat Machine on Instagram was describing there, then I would maybe get yourself checked out and see if you need a blood patch or if you have a cerebrospinal fluid leak, which is a CSF leak. Like I had mentioned earlier on, if you can remember, I was talking about Coronation Street and soaps on UK TV, which I wanted to talk about representation. Well, as Coronation Street, I love a bit of Hollyoaks. That was one of the soaps that I watched a lot when I was younger. These are the two soaps that I kind of want to talk through. I did say that I started kind of watching Coronation Street probably about 2.5 years ago, and I think I've watched every episode up until there. From talking about hard of hearing, it was actually on Coronation Street where I'd kind of learned about cochlear implants and kind of the idea of wanting your child to not be disabled and be quote unquote normal and have an implant and hear normally and not teach them sign language or anything like that, how you are excluding them from a community where they could be really supported. You don't know what it's like for your child to live inside of that body with a disability, whereas people in these support groups do. And if you want your child to be quote unquote normal and go to normal school and not associate with people who also have the same disability, then you're actually giving your child a disadvantage. And without seeing that, yeah, it would have probably been something that would have came to my mind, but having it on the TV, I feel like it went in a lot better, especially when I was writing that. It was something that was at the forefront of my mind, was that episode and how they did the sign language, and I'm not sure if it was intentional not to have subtitles and how there was backlash about it, but that's showing people who don't have hearing loss what it is like to not have subtitles. I think from talking about EDS, one of the cast members in Coronation Street, Cherry Lee Houston, who plays Izzy and uses a power chair, has EDS. And I remember it was probably back round about like 2009, 2010, there was like a big increase on soaps doing live shows, and I remember there being a point where she stood up and there being uproar of like, oh, Corrie have really fucked up, like they're showing a disabled person and she's standing up. It's fluid, dynamic disability. She can walk short distances, she can stand up, she is not bound to a wheelchair. However, when thinking about it, looking back at that time, I never seen anything that cleared it up to say this woman actually lives with EDS, she has a disability. And when I was looking for information on it, I came across an article which had said that Cherry Lee Houston was actually getting out of her house and going into her car, walking a very short distance, and her neighbour saw her not using her wheelchair and phoned like DWP on her and basically said that she was like faking it for benefits. Being in a wheelchair is so exhausting, I wouldn't want to fake it. Like, I would love to be able to get up and walk and do things. Like, I don't get what this mentality is around, oh, you must be faking your disability. Another storyline that has really hit me, I think, on Coronation Street has to be the storyline about Paul's journey with MND, losing ability, having to rely on carers, with the problems that they may be late because of their other clients. There's a lot of stress on these professions. I felt like that was something that was depicted quite well. Also, the idea of people turning up late, you not wanting your family to help you because you've got carers, and then having an accident because you tried to do it yourself but you can't do it yourself. And it was such a... There was these episodes that felt like they were very powerful. One where Paul was trying to go to the toilet, said he didn't need help, his carer was going to be there, he was late, he had an accident, his partner came home and he started screaming at him, telling him to get out because of embarrassment. And those are feelings that I've very much had, I've very much felt. And then I think it was the episode that was done for Valentine's Day. They were meant to be getting him a motorbike with a sidecar, but it didn't have the sidecar, it was just the motorbike, and he had people trying to help him onto the back of the bike. It was done in a first person view of these people trying to help you and being in pain and not being able to do it and really wanting to do it, but feeling pressure from people and it getting too much where you just break and say, fucking leave me alone, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, just leave me alone, I don't want to do it. There has been times like that where I have felt like that about my disability, and sometimes I felt like it's not really depicted very well. I know that soaps aren't real life, but I feel like there's been a definite improvement to make it more like real life. When I was looking at kind of representation, Coronation Street were actually kind of ahead of the curve, as their kind of first transgender storyline with Hayley Cropper was in 1998, which is wild to think about, that was nearly 30 years ago, and even now it's still such a problem in society. Like, fucking just let people be who they want to be. The other soap that I enjoy that I wanted to talk about is Hollyoaks, and the reason I kind of chose to go on to that because I did see that they have taken a lot more involvement with younger people in developing their storylines. There was a story with cancer where they worked closely with a girl who was on TikTok. I can't remember her name. I feel like it's maybe Sherry. So like the one video that pops into my head when I think about it is like when she lost her hair from chemo and she was literally like sticking like Cheerios and shit to her head to make like hair out of it, and they involved her in the storyline of this cancer journey. And I remember they also had an episode where they had some of her videos being kind of inspirational, and there's been a kind of a big move, I think, on a lot more hard-hitting storylines. Like whenever I play Hollyoaks on catch-up nowadays, there's guidance warnings, self-harm, sexual abuse, things like that, addiction, a wide range of things where I watch it and I know that it's not real, but it's still being able to portray real emotions. And I think one of the things about that is there is a wheelchair user in Hollyoaks who the character is Freya, but in real life she uses a wheelchair because she has EDS as well, which is why I kind of picked EDS as being the disability spotlight for today, although it is less of a visible disability. There has been some storylines with Freya which kind of resonated with me as a wheelchair. There was literally, as a wheelchair, I'm just a wheelchair now. No, I've had that before, but no, wheelchair user. It kind of resonated with me, and it was literally maybe just one thing that really stuck out. It was like a 10-15 second clip at the end, and she was going to the cinema with her boyfriend and letting her boyfriend push her. She was saying like, come on, hurry up, push me faster, like I could go quicker myself. And to me that just shows, like, it shows the care when you let somebody else push your wheelchair. Like, it's a big thing for disabled people, and I think a lot of people don't really see that in society, especially with people coming up and pushing me in my wheelchair and not understanding why I'm not happy about it. I thought those things were really hard hitting in those soaps. It really came across as kind of good representation to me. And there is actually another BBC programme called Best Interests, which I haven't watched yet, but when I was looking for information and stuff on representation, I'd found this video, and it is from the actors and producers kind of talking about the show and disability representation, and I thought there was some really good sentiments in it.
There are many beautiful stories in this life. Please don't assume that Marnie's story is going to be any less beautiful. It'll just be different, and you have to adapt to that difference.
Our country has a really troubled relationship with disability. There's an ableism that is really scary. If television can find a way to tell disabled stories, then that thing of being the empathy box in the corner of the room will challenge people and will hopefully lead to disabled people not being treated the way they have been treated.
I think Best Interests touches on aspects of disability that aren't very openly discussed, such as shifts in family dynamics and difficulties managing love relationships. Also, the mental toll that it takes on families when you have a family member who has to suffer and there is nothing you can do about it.
I think stories about disability are really, really important at the moment. So when the opportunity to tell this story came up, it felt really important, and it felt really important that it wasn't just a singular story of disability, and it wasn't exclusively from the parent's perspective. And what we've tried to do throughout is cast a number of disabled actors playing a number of different parts, so that there is a disabled experience that hopefully runs through the whole show.
And a packet of condoms.
Okay, George, keep it clean.
Condoms are clean.
I think it's so important that we look at it with honesty. It's just really, really beautiful.
It's been an amazing experience, actually. All jobs are a little bit life-changing, you know, if you choose the right jobs, but this one really has been.
That end sentiment, life-changing job, being an actor, working with disabled people, understanding the challenges that they actually go through, and it is really important. I realised when I was breathing in there I was squeaking. If you could hear that, I apologise. But yeah, like I've been saying all through this episode, it feels very important to have views of disabled people shared, and being authentic and being truthful and saying how hard it's been, and also sharing the triumphs and the achievements that I've had. That's the whole reason of doing this podcast, because my accident initially thought it was life-threatening, but it became life-changing, and my life has changed in a multitude of ways, but I wouldn't change that for who I am as a person now, because I'm so much happier than I was before I had my accident. And I feel like if I was on the path where I was a nurse and I was struggling as much as I was, I'd probably be 6 feet under by now. And I'm not being disabled. Being disabled has given me a level of strength where I don't want to kill myself anymore. Yeah, there's the ideation, there's the thoughts, but there's no real plan, no real motive, because my life feels exciting to me now, and before it just used to feel dark. It's really important to see people who have been through things, who have lived with disability all their lives, and listen to their views and listen to their stories and have empathy for the things that they've been through, but also have pride for the life that they lead by themselves. Not pity pride, not sympathy, but genuine happiness that somebody has struggled with a disability and they are still able to make so much out of their life. And I don't mean if you see somebody in a shop and telling them that they're brave, because that's not it. Like, yeah, going to the shop for disabled people can be very challenging, but I don't want to be called brave for just doing things that anybody else does in their life when you don't know the rest of the story. Lastly, I want to round this episode off by looking at some unrealistic portrayals of disability in the media. The first thing that I am going to play for you is a little bit of a video essay from TikTok. It is by Kimberly_Tissy. I'll put the actual thing on screen, but this is her take on Me Before You, and I am going to kind of give some commentary on it after this video.
We need to talk about how insensitive Me Before You is, because rewatching it as an adult is completely different to watching it as a teenager. I watched it when I was 16. That's when it came out in 2016, and I loved it. I cried my eyes out. I have rewatched this movie so many times as a teenager, and watching it now at 23, I'm only just realizing how insensitive it is about disabled people. So if you haven't already watched it, Will is quadriplegic and his parents hire a carer for him. This is her, Lou, in the film. They look gorgeous, by the way, aren't they? Just like a beautiful couple. And they end up falling in love. That's essentially the story. And after they've fallen in love, he is pretty much miserable the whole of the film. But towards the end, he decided that he wants assisted unaliving, essentially. He wants to no longer be alive. And they help him to no longer be alive. Now, the reason this film is really insensitive is because it feeds into this idea of disability as tragedy. It feeds into the idea that once you are disabled, life is over. And especially in Will's story, all that we get is this idea of, you know, he was very vibrant before the disability. He was always going out and doing incredible things, and he wants to climb mountains, and, you know, he wants to conquer the world, and he had all these friends, and now all his friends are gone, and he had this beautiful wife, and now his beautiful wife is gone. Essentially, disability equals tragedy. It's tragic. It's the end of the world. While there are hardships that come with disability, obviously there are some struggles, there is pain, etc., this film seems to suggest that unaliving, no longer being alive, is a better situation than to be disabled. It is so insensitive, in my opinion, for that to be the storyline. It is so insensitive for this to not just be a story about love, and it blossoms and they live happily ever after. And when it comes to making films about marginalized communities, I've said it once and I will say it 1,000 times, there needs to be a sensitivity in handling the subject so that you are not feeding a beast. You are not feeding stereotypes that are extremely harmful. You are not feeding the audience ideas that are extremely harmful. We do not have enough films within mainstream media that represents disabled people in a positive light. We don't have that. So if you are picking up the idea of making a film about a disabled person, and that film feeds into those same tragic stereotypes, feeds into this idea of them not having anything worth living for, put the pen down. Put the pen down. You don't need to write anything. Put the pen down, please.
I feel like when I was younger, I read the book, and I feel like I've seen the movie as well, and I never quite thought about it before, but it's actually something where I'm thinking about. I'm not a massive movie person, but I do want to kind of rewatch the movie and think and see how I feel about it, so maybe that will be another episode in the series of representation of me watching Me Before You, saying what I think about it, calling out the parts that are ableist or just wrong in the fact that it sees people who are disabled as not having a life worth living, which isn't true. When Stephen Hawking died, there was a lot of cartoons published in national newspapers where he was depicted as being free from his disability after his death. People saw Stephen Hawking's wheelchair as being a cage that restricted him from living his full life, but one of the many issues with this mindset is that is not how Stephen Hawking felt about his disability. It was actually the complete opposite of what he had said throughout his life. While many people felt that his disability was restricting, he used it as a positive characteristic. He didn't see his wheelchair and his communication device as being a barrier. He saw it as something that helped him to live the life he wanted to live and teach and educate people and learn things. And that's something that without those things, without those aids, he wouldn't have been able to do it. I don't know why it comes to my mind if hypothetically I died and woke up in heaven having legs, would I know how to walk? Would it just come back to me because I'm in heaven, or would I be in my wheelchair with one leg where heaven is accessible to my needs because that was the happiest version of me on earth? I do get really excited when I see somebody in a wheelchair on TV or in movies, but there are quite a few times where wheelchair users in TV or movies aren't actually wheelchair users in real life. And I feel like that is unfair to disabled actors. Some movies are written with lead actors already in mind, but this then means that they don't have the real life experience. They don't have the chance to actually represent a whole chunk of the whole chunk of a community because they're not actually disabled. And I think a big one for me, which was disappointing to find out that the character wasn't really a wheelchair user in real life, was when I was watching Superstore on Netflix. I really liked the character of Garrett, who was a wheelchair user and quite a big part of the show, but in real life, his name is Colton Dunn and he is an able-bodied comedian. When looking for research on this, I actually found a video of Colton explaining his thoughts of portraying this character, and I'm going to play it because I get what he's saying, but I definitely have some thoughts on it.
There's definitely some responsibility, I think, especially playing a character who uses a wheelchair. So we talked about that a lot at the beginning of the show. We even had talked about maybe not having Garrett use the wheelchair once I got cast in it, because they had auditioned people who used wheelchairs, and the script had always had that character in a wheelchair. But once I was cast, they were we were sort of like, well, should we not do it? Should we just have you not use the wheelchair? But I think after thinking about it, and talking to a lot of people, I felt like it was important to have that character represented. The group of people that we are representing in that show are obviously kind of people who work at, a big box store. And I wanted to show the diversity of that group of people. The other part about it is that that's like the smallest part about Garrett's personality is the fact, it's nothing about, who he is, the fact that he uses the wheelchair. He's such a really strong, cool character. And I thought that was a more positive thing to play than, taking it out.
It's such a small part of his character, but you decided to keep it in. If it was such a small part, why didn't you take it out of the script? If it was such a small part, what? Why didn't you cast somebody who auditioned for it who was actually a wheelchair user? It doesn't make sense to me. How can it be such a small part of his personality but still so positive to represent it? Those people who auditioned that were wheelchair users, they might have actually had real life experience of working in a supermarket when they're trying to get jobs being an actor, but there's fucking comedians who aren't disabled that are taking the role. I get it. I get that it needs to be represented because people in wheelchairs do work in stores. Wheelchair users do have jobs where you work in a shop. But if there was people that auditioned for it that were wheelchair users, why are you playing the character? I don't get it. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. A lot of time on social media, disability can be used as inspiration porn. The way that you act and talk around disabled people is important. Don't be scared to look at them. Don't be nervous to talk to them. If you're worried about offending somebody, ask somebody what kind of language they like and they don't like, or that they think is outdated. Like I have said about this podcast, it's called the Chronicles. When I tell people the name of it, some people get offended by that, mostly able-bodied people, how it's an outdated term. I refer to myself as a cripple. I don't care if somebody else called me a cripple, whether it was in a good way or a bad way, because I would be like, yeah, you're right, my disability does cripple me. However, I wouldn't go up to other disabled people without asking about that type of language and just outwardly call them a cripple, because that's disrespectful. Not just disrespectful, it's being a fucking horrible person, because they might have been bullied or had somebody use that word where it does cause pain, and I'm not going to do that to somebody just because I'm comfortable with being called it. So if you're speaking to somebody, if you're worried, ask them. They won't be offended. It's better to ask somebody than to use terminology that is offensive. Once you do that, then it is possible not to look at a disabled person as an inspiration. Instead, just simply look at them as a normal person, just living their life without their disability getting in the way. There's another wheelchair user that I follow on Instagram, and I love her content, and there's actually a video that she'd done which I felt like it added in very well to this. This is from Nina_Tame on Instagram.
Are you feeling sad? Lack of motivation in your life? Well, never fear. You just need a disabled person to make you feel grateful for what you've got. Look, this disabled person actually had a shower and brushed their teeth. What's your excuse? Oh, look, she's making the bed and her legs don't even work. It's so inspiring. Oh, look, and here she is making a cup of tea. Doesn't that just make you feel grateful for what you've got?
Disabled people don't exist to inspire you. Disabled people don't exist to make you feel better about your lives, and disabled people certainly don't exist to help you to feel grateful for what you've got. It's gross. It's mank. Not a fan. Don't do it. Okay, thanks, bye.
Very well put, Nina. I hate being made out to be inspiration porn. Like, I just want to live my life. And I know throughout this episode it has been lengthy and I have covered more positive things than negative things. However, I do feel like a big part of negative portrayal in the media is an attitude that disabled people are less than, or roles being played of disabled people who aren't disabled. And I'm going to get more into downsides of representation in the next episode because it's about more invisible disabilities, and I feel like invisible disabilities are a bit harder to represent, but there's still a way of doing it because those people deserve to have the representation. All of this is just my thoughts, the things that I've found, the information that I've looked at. I'm always happy for people to give me other things that I might missed. Like, I'm always happy to do another episode where I say, like, look, I didn't totally cover everything there. The next episode is going to be in a few weeks' time, and it's going to be about the other side and how more invisible disabilities can be represented, and dive into all of the information that I have found on that. Like I said, I have another poem from Danielle Kopke, or Unapologetically Human on Instagram, that I'm going to read to finish out today's episode. What if instead of beating yourself up for all of the ways which you struggle, what if instead of shaming yourself for the behaviours that show up in a response to your attachment wounds and painful memories and traumas, you viewed those struggles as resourceful ways little you survived things at the time you had no other way to survive? What if you acknowledged that you may have not survived without them? What if you could give yourself permission to show yourself compassion and grace, because unlearning behaviours that have helped you survive for a lifetime is not something that we can let go of and change overnight? What if instead of viewing yourself as a failure for having these responses and patterns, you could recognise that to be human is to struggle in some capacity, that to be a person in a hard world full of imperfect people is to hurt and make mistakes and not have all of the answers and still have room for growth, that you don't have to be perfectly regulated human who never messes up, because no one is perfectly regulated, because you can be messy, complex, human version of yourself and still have strengths and goodness and light that make you a person worth being and knowing. What if instead of feeling ashamed for struggling to regulate your emotions and get through the day without panicked or triggered or overwhelmed or wanting to isolate, you considered that you likely have caregivers who never taught you how to regulate your emotions, parents who were likely dysregulated themselves and modelled those behaviours on you? What if you considered that we learn how to regulate our emotions through caregivers who help us identify, sit with, and soothe our emotions? How can you expect yourself to be skilled at something you were never taught and haven't yet given yourself the opportunity as an adult to learn and practice and master? What if you could name these old stories of self-hatred and shame when they show up, knowing that this is a place your brain goes to when life gets hard or you feel vulnerable or reminded of old wounds, knowing that it makes sense that your mind goes here given your past, knowing that your thoughts can just be thoughts and we don't always have to assign meaning to them, knowing that old stories can be pain we honour and name but don't have to act on, knowing that we can't go back in time and change the hurt that's been inflicted, but we can decide who we want to be and what we want to move forward today, knowing that this is what defines you and where your power truly is. How can you honour the hurt and anger that your emotions and needs weren't tended to in ways you needed and deserved as a child, and, at the time, actively make decisions as the adult you are today to learn new skills? How can you honour the pain of your past and all the ways it made sense, and, as the adult you are today, make the decisions to show up from a place of your values and what's important to you, rather than a place of avoidance, rejection and fear? What if you considered that the reason it's hard to let go of certain patterns and behaviour isn't because you're broken or pathetic or bound for failure, but because they're still serving a purpose and helping you to survive in some way? What if moving towards change means getting curious and asking, what need is this allowing me to get met? What is this protecting me from? What uncomfortable or scary things is this helping me to avoid? And is there another, more sustainable and more productive way to get this need met? Is there something I actually need to protect myself from? What's the cost of avoiding this or engaging in this behaviour on my life, on my relationships? How would I be showing up in my life if this fear didn't exist? What would it look like to show up as a person I want to be, as someone who would make me proud because I'm honouring what's important to me? And I just thought that was a very good way to end the podcast. It leads on to the things that are going to be discussed in a couple of weeks' time. So take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, and I'll chat to you in a couple of weeks. Bye! Thank you for listening to another episode of the Cripple Chronicles. See you later. Bye!